Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dark's Tales. I know many of you use these videos to fall asleep. So before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I sat on my couch, half asleep, when the knock came. It was abrupt and firm, cutting through the silence of my small home. I glanced at the clock on the wall, the glowing numbers reading 2:14 a.m. My stomach turned as I stood, my feet hesitant on the cold floor. When I opened the door, the porch was empty. A chill ran through me as I stepped outside, scanning the street for any sign of movement. The neighborhood was still, the streetlights casting long shadows against the pavement. Then I noticed the package on my doorstep. It was a plain brown box, about the size of a shoebox. There was no label, no return address, just my name, scrolled in black ink. My breath hitched as I bent down, my fingers brushing against the rough cardboard. A strange sense of unease crept up my spine. I carried it inside, placing it on the kitchen table. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for a knife to cut through the tape. The air felt thick, heavy with something I couldn't quite name. Taking a deep breath, I sliced the box open and peeled back the flaps. Inside was an old wooden box, its surface scratched and worn. It smelled faintly of something earthy, like damp wood or raged paper. I ran my fingers along the carved edges, feeling the intricate designs with cautious hands. I lifted the lid. A folded piece of parchment lay inside, along with a small silver key. The parchment crackled as I unfolded it, my heart pounding in my chest. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Jagged letters, scrawled and hurried strokes. The message was simple: Dio not lose the key. I stared at the words, my mind racing with questions. Who had left this here? Why me? I picked up the key. Its cool metal, sending a shiver through my palm. It was old, ornate, with a design that suggested it belonged to something important. I checked my phone, but there were no missed calls or messages. I wanted to believe this was some sort of mistake, but something told me it wasn't. The knock had been deliberate, and the package had been meant for me. I felt watched, though my windows revealed nothing but darkness outside. Sleep was impossible after that. I left the box on the table, but the key remained in my pocket. Each time I dozed off, I jolted awake, feeling as though someone was standing just beyond my vision. When the sun finally rose, I was relieved, though the unease never faded. The key occupied my thoughts throughout the day. It felt important, but to what? I searched my house for anything it might belong onto, but found nothing. A deeper instinct told me that whatever it opened wasn't inside my home. That night, Another knock came. This time, it was softer, almost hesitant. My chest tightened as I approached the door, my hands clenching into fists. When I opened it, no one was there. Only a slip of paper on the ground. I picked it up, my heart hammering against my ribs. The same jagged handwriting stared back at me. Use the key. Before I teased too late. My mouth went dry as I read the words again. Too late for what? And where was I supposed to use it? My mind raced. The key. Close, feeling its weight. As I lay in bed, the night stretched on. Shadows moving strangely in the corners of my room. Every creak of the house made me tense, my ears straining for sounds that didn't belong. By morning, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. I needed answers. I traced my steps from the previous night, searching for anything I might have missed. Then, I noticed something on my porch that hadn't been there before. A door. An old, weathered door, standing upright, with no walls around it. My breath caught in my throat as I approached it. It shouldn't have been possible. Yet there it was, real as anything. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle. Locked, my pulse pounded as I pulled the key from my pocket. The metal slid into the lock with an unsettling ease. My breath hitched as I turned it. The mechanism clicking softly. The door creaked open, revealing screamed not to step through. But I couldn't ignore the pull. I took a shaky breath and stepped forward. The air on the other side was cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and something metallic. The door swung shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. My heart raced as I reached out, feeling rough stone beneath my fingertips. A tunnel stretched ahead, barely visible in the dim light, filtering through unseen cracks. I wasn't alone. I wasn't alone. A whisper slithered through the air. My name spoken in a voice I didn't recognize. My breath came in shallow gasps as I turned, but there was no one there. The sound came again, closer this time. Panic gripped me, but I forced myself to move forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. The tunnel narrowed, pressing it around me. My fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. Another door. My pulse thundered as I lifted the key, fitting it into a second lock. The door groaned open, revealing a small room with a single object in its center, a mirror, its surface cracked and warped. My reflection stared back, but something was wrong. The eyes in the glass weren't mine. A slow smile spread across my reflection's face, one I hadn't made. The figure raised a hand, pressing it against the glass. My body refused to move as the figure leaned forward, whispering words I couldn't hear. Then, with a sudden jolt, the mirror shattered. Story 2. The invitation arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. The handwriting was elegant yet unfamiliar. My name written in neat cursive on the front. Inside, simple card bore an invitation to a party at an address I didn't recognize. There was no host's name, no RSVP details, just a time and location. Curiosity got the best of me, and I searched for the address online. It was located in a quiet residential neighborhood, a few miles away, not far from places I had been before. There were no business listings or event announcements tied to it, and the street view showed an ordinary-looking house. I debated whether to go, but something about the mystery intrigued me. As the evening arrived, I got dressed and headed out, my mind filled with questions. Who had sent the invitation? Why had they invited me specifically? The drive was uneventful, the roads empty except for the occasional passing car. When I finally turned onto the street, a strange unease settled in my stomach. The house stood at the end of the block, a two-story structure with dark windows and an unlit porch. There were no decorations, no signs of a party, and no other cars parked nearby. I double-checked. The invitation confirming I had the right place. The house was completely silent. I hesitated before stepping out of my car, scanning the area for any signs of life. The neighboring houses were quiet, their windows glowing faintly from within. The street lights flickered dimly, casting long shadows along the pavement. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the short path to the front door. I knocked twice, the sound echoing in the stillness. I waited, but no one answered. I knocked again, this time louder, straining my ears for movement inside. The silence felt unnatural, as if the house itself was holding its breath. I glanced around, expecting someone to appear from the shadows, but the night remained undisturbed. I tried the door, pushing lightly against it, and to my surprise, it creaked open. A cold draft slipped out, sending a chill down my spine. Again, against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The interior was dark, except for the faint glow of moonlight streaming through the windows. The air smelled stale, like dust and something faintly metallic. I fumbled for a light switch, but found nothing. My phone's flashlight barely cut through the darkness, revealing an empty living room. Furniture sat covered in white sheets, untouched for what looked like years. The walls were bare, the silence overwhelming. There were no decorations, no music, no signs that a party had ever been planned. My heart pounded as I took another step forward, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight. I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the empty space. No response. I checked the kitchen, the dining room, both just as lifeless. Dust coated the counters, and the air felt heavy with neglect. The house felt abandoned, yet the invitation had been sent just days ago. A staircase led to the second floor, its railing coated in a fine layer of dust. I hesitated at the bottom, every instinct telling me to turn back. But curiosity wed at me, urging me to go further. I placed a hand on the railing and slowly ascended, each step creaking. Beneath me, at the top of the stairs, a long hallway stretched into the darkness. Several doors lined the walls, all slightly ajar. I approached the first one, pushing it open with trembling fingers. The bedroom beyond was empty, except for an old wooden chair in the center. Room. Finding nothing but dust-covered furniture, the entire house felt wrong, like a place frozen in time. I was about to turn back when I noticed something down the hall. The last door at the end of the hallway was closed. Unlike the others, it had no dust on the handle, no signs of neglect. My pulse quickened as I approached, my fingers tingling with unease. I reached for the knob, hesitated, then turned it slowly. The door swung open, revealing a small room with a single window. In the center stood a table, and on it, a single envelope. My name was written on the front, in the same handwriting as the invitation. My mouth went dry as I stepped inside, the floor feeling colder beneath my feet. I picked up the envelope, my fingers trembling. Inside was a note, short and simple. You shouldn't have come. The words sent ice through my veins. A floorboard creaked behind me, and I spun around. The hallway was empty, but the air had changed. The house no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied. I backed out of the room, my breaths coming faster. The shadows seemed to shift, closing in around me. I rushed down the stairs, my footsteps echoing through the silence. The front door loomed ahead, and I reached for it, yanking it open with force. The night air hit me like a wave, but just as I stepped outside, something caught my eye. Across the street, standing beneath a flickering street lamp, was a figure. They were motionless, their face obscured by the shadows. My heart pounded as I stared, waiting for them to move, to speak, to do anything. But they only stood there, watching. A cold dread settled in my gut, and I forced myself to move. Rushing to my car, I threw the door open and slid inside, walking it behind me. My hands shook as I fumbled for the keys. The figure still unmoving in the distance. The engine roared to life, and I didn't hesitate. I sped down the street, my eyes darting to the rear-view mirror. The figure remained beneath the street lamp, watching until I turned the corner and lost sight of them. My breath came in ragged gasps as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind racing. When I got home, I locked every door, every window, double-checking each one. I sat on my couch, my hands still shaking, staring at the invitation that now felt like a warning. Sleep never came that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the figure beneath the street lamp, waiting. Days passed, but the unease never left. I threw the invitation away, trying to convince myself it had been some elaborate prank. But every night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One evening, as I stepped outside to get the mail, my breath caught in my throat. There, sitting on my doorstep, was another envelope. The same handwriting, the same eerie silence in the air. My fingers trembled as I picked it up, turning it over. This time, the message was different. We'll see you soon. Story 3. The road stretched endlessly ahead, dark and empty, except for the glow of my headlights. I had been driving for hours. The silence, presentry, blurred past. It was the kind of road that made you feel alone in the world, cut off from everything. The only sound was the hum of my engine and the occasional chirp of insects in the night. Then, in my rear-view mirror, I saw a pair of headlights appear in the distance. At first, I thought nothing of it, but they were approaching fast. Within seconds, the vehicle was right behind me, its high beams glaring into my mirror. A cold chill crept down my spine as I tightened my grip on the wheel. The car was too close, ickily tailgating me on the empty road. I tapped my brakes lightly, hoping they would back off, but they didn't. Instead, they edged even closer, the headlights filling my mirrors. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the road ahead, searching for a place to pull over. A small turnout appeared on the right, and I signaled, easing onto the gravel shoulder. The moment I slowed down, the car behind me swerved into the other lane without hesitating. It sped past, its engine roaring as it disappeared into the night. I exhaled sharply, my hands trembling on the wheel. Something felt off. I hadn't seen the driver's face, not even a silhouette in a windshield. The car's windows had been impossibly dark, like black glass, reflecting nothing. I pulled back onto the road, shaking the UN knees from my mind. Maybe it was just some reckless driver, someone in a hurry to get somewhere. But as I continued, the road ahead remained empty. No taillights in the distance, no sign of the car that had just sped past. Minutes passed, then an hour. There were no turns, no exits, just a straight road through miles of thick forest. I should have seen the car ahead of me by now. It was as if it had vanished into thin air. My pulse quickened as a new thought took hold. What if I had imagined it? The exhaustion of driving alone for so long could play tricks on the mind. I shook my head, gripping the wheel tighter. No, I had seen it. The headlights, the way it loomed too close behind me. It had been real. I turned on the radio, needing some kind of noise to break the silence. Static greeted me, followed by faint whispers before cutting out entirely. My stomach twisted as I checked my phone. No signal. The isolation of the road suddenly felt suffocating. Then, out of nowhere, a pair of headlights appeared in my mirror. My breath hitched as I recognized them immediately. The same car, the same blinding high beams. It was back. My foot pressed harder on the gap pass, my speed climbing as fear crawled up my spine. The car behind me matched my pace, staying right on my bumper. My knuckles turned white as I struggled to keep control, the road curving slightly as I pushed faster. I tried to ignore the way my heartbeat thundered in my ears. I needed to think. If I pulled over again, would it pass? Would it disappear like last time? The thought of stopping made my skin crawl. The road opened up to a stretch of straight highway, and I took the chance to slow down. Just slightly, the car remained behind me unmoving. Then, without warning, it swerved sharply into the opposite lane. I held my breath as it pulled up beside me, keeping perfect pace. My hands trembled as I turned my head, desperate to see the driver, but all I saw was darkness. The windows were pitch black, back, no outline of a person inside. It was like staring into a void. I pressed harder on the gas, my car surging forward, but the other vehicle kept up effortlessly. Then just as suddenly as it had appeared, it veered off the road. My eyes widened as it sped straight into the dense trees without. Slowing down, I slammed on my brakes, my tires screeching as I skidded to a stop. My chest rose and fell in rapid breaths as I stared at the spot where the car had vanished. There was no crash, no sound, nothing. It was as if the car had never been there. Swallowing hard, I forced myself to move. I couldn't sit there all night. My hands shook as I put the car in drive, my headlights cutting through the darkness. I kept my eyes on the road, refusing to check my mirrors again. I didn't stop until I reached a gas station miles away. The bright fluorescent lights were a welcome relief as I parked and stepped out, my legs unsteady beneath me. I walked inside, my hands still trembling as I ordered a cup of coffee. The cashier, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, gave me a curious look. "You all right?" he asked, noting my pale face. I hesitated before nodding. "Just a long drive," I muttered. He glanced outside at my car, then back at me. "You come down Route 46? I froze. "Yeah, why?" The man sighed, shaking his head. "Lot of strange things happen on that road," he said. "People talk about a black car that follows them. Always too close. No driver." My blood ran cold. "What happens to them?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Some make it here," he said, his gaze darkening. "Some don't. A A shiver crawled up my spine. I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to know. All I knew was that I wasn't taking that road ever again. Story 4. The first time I heard the scratching, I dismissed it as tree branches against the glass. The wind had been strong that night, and I assumed it was just the bare limbs of the old oak outside my window. I fell asleep easily, forgetting about the sound by morning. But the next night, it happened again. It was soft at first, a light tapping against the window pane, like something small was brushing against it. But as the night went on, it grew more deliberate, more rhythmic. I turned on my bedside lamp and pulled back the curtain, expecting to see the branches swaying in the wind. There was nothing outside but darkness. I stared for a while, waiting to see if something moved. But the yard was still. No wind, no branches close enough to touch the window. A chill ran down my spine as I let the curtain fall back into place. The scratching stopped. The next day, I examined the outside of my window in the daylight. The glass was clean. No marks, no signs of anything brushing against it. The tree was at least 5 feet away, its branches too far to reach. There were no animal tracks in the dirt beneath the window. Either that night, I stayed up waiting. I kept my light on and my eyes fixed on the window, determined to catch whatever was causing the sound. Hours passed, and just as I was beginning to drift off, it started again. A slow, deliberate scratching, like nails dragging across the glass. I sat up quickly, my breath caught in my throat. This time I didn't rush to pull back the curtain. I waited, listening to the sound as it continued. The scratching wasn't random. It came in short bursts, stopping for a few seconds before starting again, like something was waiting for a response. My heart pounded as I finally pulled the curtain aside. There was nothing there, just my own reflection staring back at me. But as I leaned closer, I thought I saw movement, a faint shadow just beyond the glass, disappearing the moment I blinked. I barely slept that night. Every time I started to drift off, I imagined something watching me through the window. By morning, I felt drained, but I forced myself to go outside again, looking for any new signs. The ground was undisturbed. No footprints, no scratches on the glass. It was as if nothing had happened. I considered setting up a camera, but part of me didn't want to know what I might see. The idea of watching the footage and discovering something standing outside my window, unseen in the moment, made my skin crawl. Instead, I convinced myself it was just my imagination, a trick of my tired mind. That night, I locked my window, double-checking that it was secure. I shut the curtains tightly and turned on my bedside lamp. I even played music softly, hoping to drown out any noise. For a while it seemed to work, but just as I was starting to relax, the scratching began again. This time, it was louder, more insistent. My stomach twisted as I gripped the blanket, willing myself to ignore it. The sound didn't stop. It grew more frantic, like something was desperate to get. Something watching me through the window. By morning, I felt drained, but I forced myself to go outside again, looking for any new signs. The ground was undisturbed, no footprints, no scratches on the glass. It was as if nothing had happened. I considered setting up a camera, but part of me didn't want to know what I might see. The idea of watching the footage and discovering something standing outside my window, unseen in the moment, made my skin crawl. Instead, I convinced myself it was just my imagination, a trick of my tired mind. That night, I locked my window, double-checking that it was secure. I shut the curtains tightly and turned on my bedside lamp. I even played music softly, hoping to drown out any noise. For a while it seemed to work, but just as I was starting to relax, the scratching began again. This time, it was louder, more insistent. My stomach twisted as I gripped the blanket, willing myself to ignore it. The sound didn't stop. It grew more frantic, like something was desperate to get. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. I wanted to call someone, but what would I say? That something invisible was scratching at my window. No one would believe me. I barely believed it myself. Instead, I sat frozen, waiting for the sound to stop. After what felt like hours, silence finally filled the room. I let out a shaky breath and closed my eyes, exhausted. But just as I was drifting off, something changed. The air in my room felt heavier, colder. I turned onto my side, facing away from the window. And then I heard it, a faint creak. The floorboards behind me. My breath caught in my throat as my entire body stiffened. I hadn't moved. I hadn't gotten up. The sound had come from inside the room. Slowly, I turned my head, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might stop. The room looked the same, nothing out of place, but the air felt wrong. I forced myself to sit up, my hands clutching the blanket. I scanned the room, trying to convince myself. In my hands, trembled as I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen. I wanted to call someone, but what would I say? That something invisible was scratching at my window. No one would believe me. I barely believed it myself. Instead, I sat frozen, waiting for the sound to stop. After what felt like hours, silence finally filled the room. I let out a shaky breath and closed my eyes, exhausted. But just as I was drifting off, something changed. The air in my room felt heavier, colder. I turned onto my side, facing away from the window. And then I heard it, a faint creak of the floorboards behind me. My breath caught in my throat as my entire body stiffened. I hadn't moved. I hadn't gotten up. The sound had come from inside the room. Slowly, I turned my head, my heart pounding, so hard I thought it might stop. The room looked the same, nothing out of place, but the air felt wrong. I forced myself to sit up, my hands clutching the blanket. I scanned the room, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. But then I noticed something. The curtains were open. I knew I had shut them. I was certain of it. My stomach twisted as I looked at the window. The lock was still in place, but the glass, it wasn't clean anymore. Faint streaks ran down the surface, as if something had been pressed against it. Something with fingers. And I didn't sleep at all after that. When the sun finally rose, I packed a bag and left, not caring that I had nowhere to go. I drove to a friend's house, making up an excuse about needing a break from home. They let me stay without question, and for the first time, in the morning, days I felt safe. I stayed there for a week. The scratching didn't follow me. No strange sounds, no open curtains. It was almost enough to convince me that I had imagined the whole thing. But when I finally returned home, everything felt off. The house smelled stale, like it had been left empty for months instead of days. The air was thick, heavy with something I couldn't name. I hesitated before stepping inside, my skin prickling with unease. I checked every window, every lock. Everything was secure. But when I reached my bedroom, my stomach dropped. The curtains were open again, and this time there were words on the glass, written in the faint streaks left behind by whatever had been outside. There was a single message, a message that made my blood run cold. I found a way in.